Let me ask you a question. You have a best friend? How big would it shock you if somebody told you that your best friend just killed somebody?
Not a law, what's your emergency?
Someone on the other line said they kidnapped my son, and they're demanding $500,000.
On September 12th, 1995, 12-year-old McKay Everett disappeared from his home in Conroe, Texas. It was a crime that shocked the community because the suspect was so unlikely, so unexpected.
Former high-ranking police official. He'd run for sheriff at one point.
Law enforcement personnel were pretty much split down the middle over whether or not he actually did this.
And to this day, McKay's mother, Paulette, still feels that justice was never truly served.
I've asked myself so many times, what in the world happened?
Ransom is available now. Listen at ransompodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 365 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How about you?
Doing great, man. Having a great week. My wife's almost done with her school year, so she's really excited about that. My youngest is home from college. My oldest is still in graduate school, but yeah.
So they got some vacation time coming up.
Yeah, we got some more family time too. And so that's always exciting. Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout outs. We had Christina Wilson.
What's going on, Christina?
Tara Suter.
Hey, Suter.
Rory jumped out to her highest level.
What up, Rory?
Furious George and Nurse Betty.
Well, hey, Furious and Nurse.
Sarah Pugh.
What's up, Sarah?
Candy Schnakenberg.
Well, hi, Candy.
Nicole.
Hey, good on Nicole.
Ray Heron jumped out to her highest level.
What up, Ray?
And last but not least, Ann Gerdes.
There's the Gerdes.
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Ari Ansbro.
Hey, Ansbro.
So appreciate the new support, the continued support. We also had a great PayPal donation from Linda Higginson.
Hey, appreciate that, Linda.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who helped support the show.
Love you all.
So next weekend, Gibbs, we will be at CrimeCon. And for anybody who's going, I just wanted to mention again that we're having a meetup Saturday night.
Yeah.
9:00 at either Fuse or Fusion. I all of a sudden forget the name of the bar.
And Morph is buying.
And Morph is buying everyone's drinks. That's
Absolutely.
what he said. But it is one of the bars inside the hotel, so it shouldn't be that hard to figure out.
It is a very large hotel.
It is a large hotel, though. I remember when we were there, what was it now, 6 years ago or something? The amount of walking really adds up.
Yeah, it was pretty extensive.
It was to get from our room to kind of like where CrimeCon was held.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like going from Tomorrowland to Adventureland or something. It was like some trek in Disney.
I needed to get up like early. I had that stuff wrapped in a little bandana on a stick, and I started
your bundle,
my
bindle.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that you ended up getting a rascal, I thought was way over the top.
Is that too much?
I thought it was.
Yeah,
because you didn't need it.
Well,
so we have an episode out right now on True Crime All the Time where we're talking about Dan White and the murder of Harvey Milk and San Francisco Mayor George Moscone.
Pretty famous case.
This is where you get the Twinkie defense, and there's really a lot going on. So if you haven't listened to it, make sure you check it out. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
We're talking about the disappearance of Christopher Hoye. In May 2022, 33-year-old Christopher Hoye left his home and never returned. His truck was found on a bridge overlooking a river, but there were no signs of him anywhere. 2 years later, Christopher still has not been found. His family has no idea what happened to him, but they have speculated about the possibility that Christopher was harmed by someone or that he possibly even ran away to start a new life. And I think we've talked about it before, but when you really have no idea, what are you left with? Speculation.
That's all you have.
What else can you do but to speculate as to what could have happened? And, there are a number of different things, but, it really comes down to accident, foul play, voluntarily running off. And in a lot of these disappearance cases, that's what I truly believe.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just what it narrows down to.
And for me, as I've often said, that kind of voluntarily running off to start a new life avenue is usually towards the bottom of my list. Now, that's not to say that it doesn't happen, because it does.
Yeah, we know it does.
But more often than not, in the cases we do, there is evidence that kind of makes it seem as though that would just be so unlikely. Christopher James Hoye was born on March 16th, 1989. Chris grew up in Peoria, Illinois. He was described as an energetic boy who liked to make people happy. He played baseball in high school and enjoyed watching games with his dad. Chris also worked a local paper route to make some money. You ever work a paper route?
I did. Yeah, I worked it maybe three years. I actually used to do the weekly paper, like the community paper.
Mm-hmm.
Then I branched out to the big paper in this area and delivered it daily.
Wow.
And even the Sunday, too.
That's a big daddy one.
Yeah, that was better money.
Yeah. So I've had a lot of jobs in my life.
Yeah.
But Paperboy was not one of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that entailed getting up very early in the morning, from what I understand.
It did.
Which has never been my strong suit.
But, I made some money, and then I branched out into lawn care service. That did not last very long, though.
Not a fan.
Well, it was too much responsibility at an early age. I mean, people really depended on you getting there to cut their grass.
As opposed to receiving their paper?
It's like, okay, so I didn't get my tip this week because you didn't get your paper on time. But they got kind of upset when you didn't cut their yard on time.
Yeah, it's pretty noticeable.
Yeah.
when your grass is not mowed. After graduation, Chris was interested in hands-on work with cars and heavy machinery. He started working for Caterpillar Inc., but he didn't like working in a controlled environment. Chris decided he wanted to be his own boss, so he started flipping houses.
There's a lot of people that don't like to be working in a controlled environment.
No, and I think if you asked people and they were honest, a lot of people would say, I really want to be my own boss.
Sure.
Now, it's oftentimes much harder than people think it is.
Right.
Or there's much more work involved, or, more responsibility involved than people think about. But it can also be very rewarding. Now, this idea of flipping houses, depending on how the market's going, can be super lucrative.
For sure.
It's about all my wife watches on HGTV.
Yeah.
Either flipping or redesigning or flipping, flopping. I don't know. They're
something
always
with a house.
They're always doing something.
Yeah.
But I also know a lot of people who have done it over the years and got really burnt when the market turned.
Yeah, you could be stuck holding some inventory that maybe you wish you didn't have.
Yeah, because it's no longer worth anywhere near what you bought it for and then put a bunch of money on top of it into.
Or you start the renovations and you run into bigger problems that you didn't know that were there.
Like code problems and needing all new electrical and all that. Chris enjoyed renovation projects, and it seemed like this career was a good fit for him. And I do think for a lot of people, there is a draw to working with your hands, right? To doing something that at the end of the day, you can say, or you can actually see, this is what I've done.
Right.
And a lot of jobs don't offer that. You can't really point to something and say, look, here's what I did. You're just doing stuff all day long, but it's really hard to see. Chris got into a relationship and had 2 children, a son and a daughter. One source listed this woman's name as Cynthia, but other sources didn't use her name at all. Chris's family was not too fond of Cynthia, and the relationship didn't last long. Chris got full custody of the children, but sources didn't say why. And I always have that question. I mean, I think not always, but very often, the mother gets custody of the children.
You're right.
So when a father gets full custody, I'm always curious as to why. Obviously, there's something going on there.
That drove that reason?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that, but we don't know what it is. On November 3rd, 2017, Chris met his wife, Alicia, at a bar in Illinois. She was waiting for a friend when Chris approached her and struck up a conversation. And they continued talking throughout the evening. Alicia said in her interview for the show Disappeared that she might have fallen in love with Chris that night.
You were falling in love with somebody in one night? I know your wife listens to this, so you know the correct answer.
Probably too many times. But it wasn't really love.
Yeah.
You know, when I was younger, you meet somebody at a bar, wouldn't call it love. I might have back then.
Yeah.
But
could have been the amount of beers that Frank the Tank had.
That could have had something to do with it.
Yeah.
But when you're young, do you really know what love is? I just had my 28th year anniversary.
Right.
So, love to me is different at this point in time than what it was when I was 20, 21 years old.
Absolutely. And even younger, right? I mean,
yes,
it changes over time what the definition or how you perceive it is.
Or the intensity, what it really means. Alicia met Chris's kids early on. She thought he was a sweet, caring father. Alicia had a daughter named Zoe from a previous relationship. Zoe was a teenager when she met Chris. Chris became a father figure to her as her dad was not involved in her life, and they developed a really close bond. In April 2019, Alicia found out she was pregnant. By this point, she and Chris had already picked their wedding date. They had a small backyard ceremony with their kids, and Alicia's cousin officiated the wedding. Chris was ecstatic to have another baby. He and Alicia created a happy, blended family. Reminds me of that movie, Blended, which I love so much.
You love that movie.
I do. I think I just talked about it the other week. But what I do want to talk about is, this relationship, these people. I mean, it sounds like they were very in love. It sounds like they were good parents. He even got along well with her teenage daughter. They formed a close bond. I mean, we got a real Brady Bunch situation going on here.
Yeah. They were happy.
It sounds like. And they're going to have another baby. By this point, Chris owned several rentals and Airbnbs in Peoria. He and Alicia had been working to grow the business, and they were making around $10,000 a month in 2019.
They're doing good.
Yeah, that's very good money. Unfortunately, they lost this source of income. When the COVID pandemic started in 2020, Chris and Alicia struggled to pay their bills, and some of the properties went into foreclosure, according to Chris's aunt. And they weren't the only ones.
Yeah, it was a pretty devastating time for the world.
It was. It was. And, it's hard to believe that we're 4 years from the start of it.
Yeah, true.
Because wasn't it around this time, around May?
Yeah, it was.
Ish?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yep, early May.
So 4 years have gone by, and we're still struggling in some aspects. But, it hit a lot of people very, very hard. In 2021, Chris and Alicia made the difficult decision to sell their properties and move. They decided to move almost 300 miles to Dixon, Missouri. They planned to start homesteading on a farm property.
Did you ever homestead?
No.
No?
I also wasn't alive in the 1800s. Maybe I should have asked you to provide me the definition of homesteading, because I'm not exactly sure what it is. I've only heard it really in like old Westerns and old shows.
Yeah, I don't think it includes DoorDash.
Oh, then I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm out. Chris and Alicia hoped it would be a new chapter for their family. Alicia's daughter, Zoe, remained in Illinois because she was engaged and enrolled in nursing school. Chris and Alicia spent the first couple of months getting settled. They bought chickens, goats, and ducks to get their homestead started. They also decided to homeschool their kids. So, it does sound to me as though you mentioned no DoorDash, but it sounds to me like this is really kind of like we're living off this land. We're providing everything for ourselves or, some situation like that.
Yeah, you would have to take care of the goats, the chickens, and the ducks, and I don't see you doing that.
No, I'm out.
Yeah. You might go collect the eggs to have in the morning, but I don't even know if you will go out and do that.
No, right now they get delivered to my house in a little carton. What else do I need? Chris seemed happy with this new, simpler life, but he was also struggling with the loss of his successful business. The couple were still having money problems, and Chris most likely felt ashamed by this. And I don't know how many people have gone through this. When you go from making X amount of money to a much lower amount of money, that is a real blow.
Yeah.
Whether you lost a job, you lost a business, or something like that. Most of us, we get accustomed to a certain lifestyle. Whatever lifestyle that our salaries will afford. If a big chunk of that money goes away, it's a dramatic change. And so I do feel like, for Chris, it very well could have felt shameful that he had lost that, where he was able to provide a certain life for his family. Now that it's a different life, maybe not at the same level.
Right. I think a lot of people just had a tough time trying to figure out where they were at with their life during that initial stages of COVID.
And yeah, through it and after it.
Yeah.
Because, they lost businesses, and that's not even talking about like the actual human life toll.
Sure.
But we're talking more about people losing businesses and their livelihoods and things like that. That took a tremendous toll as well. When Zoe came to visit them, she said they had everything they needed for homesteading and had done some work on the house. The kids were excited about their new home. However, Zoe noticed that something was off with Chris. He told her, "I'm going through it." Okay, what do you make of that?
So is he saying, look, I've got a lot of things going on and I'm going through it. And maybe, for him, it wasn't easy at that time.
Yeah, I took it to mean that he was struggling with some things. Now, what those things were, besides, what we've already talked about, I don't know. Alicia got a part-time job as an ABA therapist. She said their marriage was in a good place, and she and Chris were building their dream. Chris Hoye was last seen in Dixon, Missouri on May 19th, 2022. It was a normal Thursday morning. Chris and Alicia woke up at 6 o'clock. They drank coffee together. They did their morning chores, and Alicia went to work. When she got home, the Dixon area was under a severe thunderstorm warning, so she and Chris went outside to do some flood prevention around the property. When they finished, Chris told Alicia he was going to take a shower. She went inside to check on the kids and was in the kitchen when Chris came out of the bathroom. She told him she was going to milk the goats, which they kept in their basement.
I see right there is where you're going to have your first problem.
Goats in my basement?
Yeah, you don't share your basement with anything, let alone some goats.
No, because goats make a lot of noise.
That's your concern?
Yeah.
Is the noise they make?
Well, there's also a lot of cleanup involved,
Okay.
But I was thinking noise at first, but now I'm thinking smell and cleanup.
Yeah.
Alicia heard Chris's truck start up and leave their driveway while she was down in the basement. She ran upstairs and saw that the truck was gone and the gate was open. Alicia asked Chris's son where his dad went. He told her, "I don't know. He told me to go to my room." That was all Chris had said to him. Alicia was both annoyed and worried. It wasn't like Chris to leave without telling her where he was going. He always told her goodbye, gave her a kiss, and told her he loved her. She wondered what kind of errand he needed to go on that would cause him to leave so abruptly.
Or what did he see, or what caused such what seemed like a rash decision?
To leave the house?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just putting myself in this position. If my wife were to leave suddenly without saying anything to me, that would be very out of the ordinary. Now, I could find out that she told me an hour ago she was leaving and where she was going, and I had already forgotten.
That would be more realistic here.
That has happened a number of times.
A day.
Alicia also noticed that Chris left his wallet and phone on a table on their porch. And again, when you're talking about signs or, things that don't seem to make sense, well, obviously both of these you would put in that column.
Yeah, it doesn't really add up, right?
Now, it's not to say that people don't forget their wallet and phone when they leave, but by and large, most people, they take their phones with them, they take their wallet. What happens if you need gas? Does it add to the mystery that this person has left so quickly without saying goodbye or without telling you where they're going, that they also left their phone and wallet? And I would say, yes, it does. And there's no doubt that she thought it was very strange. She called a friend to watch the kids so that she could go look for Chris. She had a strong intuition that she needed to go to the river, which was less than a mile from their house. She thought that if Chris needed to get away, he would go to the river because he liked being in nature. Alicia found Chris's truck at the Veterans Bridge off Highway 28 next to the Gasconade River. The first thing she noticed was that Chris left the truck unlocked with the keys in the ignition. There was nothing else inside except a single cigarette butt. She didn't see any footprints around the truck to indicate what direction Chris went. When she looked around, she saw that he had parked at the spot where they normally took the kids swimming.
So are you suspicious at this point? Or are you kind of like...
I don't know if you're suspicious, but I think if you are Alicia, you're curious, you're maybe even worried, as to what's going on. Why would he leave the keys in the truck? Why did he park at this specific spot where they park when they take the kids swimming? Yeah. But, he's nowhere to be found. The Gasconade River is deep and fast moving, and the water was especially high after the storm. Alicia feared that Chris was in the water, so she called the police to report her husband missing.
I think that's a smart thing to do. I mean, that should be a big concern.
She felt like the police were taking her report seriously because they started search efforts immediately. It looked like Chris had parked on the bridge with the intention of getting in the water, so his disappearance was treated as an emergency from the beginning. Militia also helped search the woods, but it was too dark to search for long. Around 9 a.m. the next morning, a detective came to the house and told Alicia they had a search team set up. 50 officers were sent out to search the woods and riverbank. So it's a pretty good search effort. But, what I want to talk about is what's that night like for Alicia? She sees her husband or hears her husband drive off, has no idea what's going on, finds his truck. He's nowhere to be found.
Right.
They search. It gets too dark. She has to go home. That's going to be a really rough night.
Probably not sleeping.
Probably not.
And then you probably have got, a child crying because they're upset because they don't know where their dad is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be tough on her for sure. Alicia called for an update around 5 o'clock. A detective told her they had used drones and searched 3 miles up and downstream, but they found no sign of Chris. The police also brought in divers and dragged the river for 5 miles, but they still found nothing. So, unlike a lot of the cases that we do, the one thing that you can't say is that this search effort wasn't immediate and pretty extensive.
Yeah, I feel like they really went all out with their efforts.
Yes, I do too. Now, we are talking about 2022. The technology is such today that, man, you can cover a lot of ground with these drones. And
these drones are really cool. I love mine because I can always see what you're cooking on your barbecue.
Yes.
And determine my show up time.
Mm-hmm. And see me give you the bird because I can hear your drone flying over.
Yeah, that does happen now. So, but it is really cool with some of the technology updates.
Man, it doesn't mean a drone would catch everything, but, can you cover more ground than people interlocked with their arms like you used to see, in older video clips. And not that they still don't do that, but walking slowly, covering, all this area.
I definitely feel like there's an advantage to having that bird's eye view in the sky.
You might see something very quickly.
Yeah.
That would take you days to uncover if you were doing more of a grid search.
Right.
But I also, think the divers and dragging the river was important because it seemed very early on that the thought was he might have possibly gone into the water. Now, it said they dragged the river for 5 miles. If this river is as fast flowing as what they said it was, a person's body could travel quite a ways overnight.
Yeah, maybe more than 5 miles.
Oh, I'm thinking so. There was no evidence of foul play, and the circumstances surrounding Chris's disappearance were unclear. Initially, the authorities considered the fact that Chris chose to end his life. And I think you have to at least consider that.
Because the financial struggles?
That plus, he parked on a bridge, left his keys there. He's right by the water. What else is he doing? Why would you park on a bridge?
Yeah.
Unless your plan was to jump into the water.
But is that going to help your family out? He was concerned about making sure that his family was okay. And by doing something like that, I think you're leaving them in a worse position.
No, obviously, it's not going to help his family. It's never going to help. It's going to be very tough on the family if that's what he actually did. But Alicia didn't believe Chris would do this, although she did acknowledge that the events of the past 2 years did weigh on him. He was not as vibrant as he once was, and he told her he was sad about the loss of his businesses because he wanted to build something to leave for his children. Chris also had a hard time dealing with the fact that they were struggling to pay their bills. When speaking to producers for the show Disappeared, Chris's aunt Teresa spoke about how he was under a lot of pressure. After moving to Missouri, homesteading costs a lot of money up front, and it takes a lot of work. And homeschooling the kids added more pressure for Chris and Alicia.
I think that would be a lot of pressure. I know a lot of people did the homeschooling during the COVID time period. Not only homesteaders, but just regular, everyday parents, because they were forced to do it because their kids weren't allowed to be back in school.
Well, life is hard. This is something my kids and I talk about a lot. They're getting older. They're experiencing more of life on their own, and they're starting to see that obviously it gets hard at certain points. I think what we're talking about here was pretty extreme for Chris, right? He goes from running some successful businesses to losing all of that, completely uproots, moves to a different state, and really embarks on a completely different lifestyle. And, when you talk about not being able to pay your bills or struggling to pay your bills, that type of financial pressure is really tough on people. You got to eat. Your kids have to eat.
Sure, yeah.
And when you're struggling to make that happen, that takes a toll on you mentally.
You don't feel like you're a good father, a good parent,
a good husband.
Yeah.
Alicia's daughter, Zoe, noticed that Chris was consistently depressed and wasn't bouncing back like he normally did after going through a hard time. And I think that's an interesting statement because we all go through hard times. Most of us, we bounce back.
Yeah.
We're resilient. Most people are.
We get knocked down, we get back up again.
Nothing's ever going to keep me down. But I'm getting the picture that this guy, Chris, wasn't as resilient as he had been. People around him were seeing that. He wasn't bouncing back.
Struggling.
He was struggling. He was depressed. The week before Chris disappeared, he told Alicia he didn't want to do this anymore. She told him she would do anything he needed to help him feel better, but he couldn't say exactly what was wrong. Alicia said communication was not Chris's strong suit.
I get that. I think you can you can feel down, you can feel at a loss, but you don't know how to fix it. You don't know how to communicate that. You just know you feel this way, and you can say, I'm sorry. I know you want more communication from me, but I don't have it to give.
Yeah, I know I've gone through a couple of times in my life where I knew that I didn't feel right, but there was no way for me to put my finger on exactly what it was and tell my wife, well, I know for sure this is why. Alicia told Disappeared, I felt like there was stuff on his mind, something big in his head, and he wasn't sharing in that week, whether it was, some outside force or his own thoughts. To this day, I can't pinpoint what was going on. I didn't know what to do. I felt like things had changed. Something had changed. And I think this is a very tough spot for her to be in as well. No doubt she wants to help her husband in any way she can. But it's really hard to help someone when they can't tell you what's wrong, or they can't shed light on what would help them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you don't know what the problem is,
or the root of it,
you can't help to try to cure it.
Alicia pointed out that Chris made plans for the future before he disappeared. He wanted to clean out their basement, and he had talked about becoming a notary. And she said Chris was the type of person who always followed through on his plans. And why is this important?
Well, if you're saying that he's somebody that always commits to his plan and follows through, why would he end his life?
Yeah, it's something we talk about quite a bit, right? Would someone, buy 2 weeks worth of groceries right before ending their life? Possibly, but I do think it's something you have to talk about. You have to keep in mind. He's depressed, but he's also making plans for the future, which would lead someone to believe that he wasn't thinking possibly about ending his life. If not, why are you making all these plans?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. But I also think sometimes the mind is a bizarre thing.
It's a little mysterious. And
yeah.
It could be that someone makes that kind of fateful decision very, very quickly.
Right.
After these plans are made, you just don't know.
You don't know what activities happen right before that would drive a decision.
Another search took place on May 29th, 2022. A canine unit was deployed to find a scent trail, and the search dog picked up a trail leading away from Chris's truck towards the highway, but the trail ended suddenly.
Adds a little twist.
It does, and I always love when we bring the dogs in. Unfortunately, it's in sometimes some very sad scenarios or stories, but we know these dogs are amazing with what they can do, but we hear this quite a bit. You have a dog who picks up a scent, but that scent disappears, let's say, right in the middle of a street. Well, what does that make people think most of the time? And to me, it's that maybe this person got into a vehicle, someone else's vehicle, and that's why their scent disappeared where it did. And the family wondered this as well, whether or not Chris was picked up by someone, but they had no idea who that person would be. Alicia considered the possibility that someone forced Chris out of the house or lured him away, and he went to try to protect his family.
And I thought the same thing. Just when you hear him tell his son, go to your room, and then take off like that. It's like, it seemed like there was a sense of urgency.
As we mentioned earlier, there were no signs of blood or violent struggle inside the truck, but there was that one cigarette butt. It wasn't a brand that either Chris or Alicia smoked, which she thought was strange. And who wouldn't think that was strange? You and I are not smokers, but if I was a smoker and I found a cigarette butt that wasn't the brand that I smoked, I would think that was weird, because smokers, I believe, are pretty loyal to their brand most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, it would definitely throw you off.
Especially when the person driving that truck goes missing and there's this one cigarette butt in the truck. And this cigarette butt is one of the only pieces of physical evidence in Chris's case. When asked about people who might want to harm Chris, Alicia recalled a disturbing incident from December 2021. According to her, meth is pretty common in their area. About 6 months before Chris went missing, they were woken up at 4 a.m. by their dogs barking. Chris went to the front door and saw someone walk down the driveway and get into a red car. He decided to follow them and confronted at least 2 individuals. He told them to stay off his property. According to local reporter Andrew Shealy, the Ozarks have been heavily affected by meth and the opioid crisis. When someone moves to the area, it's common for criminals to check out their property to see if they have anything of value.
Sure, they want to steal it and sell it and
buy meth.
Yeah.
Also makes me think of that show, The Ozarks.
Great show.
Great show. I was sorry that it ended. The person who showed up at the Hoye property in the middle of the night was likely casing the house for a future burglary. For the next 6 months, according to Alicia, the car regularly drove past their house at all hours, and the driver honked at them and flipped them off.
Well, you know what wouldn't go well? If that was your house and that car did that to you.
No, it wouldn't, but here's my thought. If you're driving by to case for a future burglary, honking and flipping off the owner doesn't seem to be the way to go about it. You're really drawing a lot of attention to yourself.
Yeah. But, some people are
brazen enough to do that.
Yeah.
I guess, but it doesn't seem like what a seasoned burglar would do. Right? You're trying to not draw any attention to yourself. I'm not going to be running my red car up and down the road, honking and flipping the owners off every day.
Yeah. Not a good thing to do.
But you could look at it as though these people were not happy, or this person or people or whoever it was, they weren't happy that Chris had caught them, had confronted them. And maybe they were sending a message of that they weren't happy.
And if you're Chris, you're going to be on guard.
Yeah, if I caught the car at 4 a.m. and the person seemed as though they were leaving my property, and now they're racing by every day, yelling at me, cussing at me, and flipping me off, my head is going to be on more of a swivel than it normally even is.
Yeah.
One day, Chris had enough. He went to the fence and got into a shouting match with the driver. Alicia approached and heard the man say, "You're lucky you have kids here. Otherwise, I'd burn your house down."
That's a pretty big threat.
Yeah, the cussing, the flipping off is one thing. But this "I'd burn your house down," that is a direct threat. Words and gestures. Okay, nobody likes that kind of stuff. It would irk you, but I don't think it would make you fear for your safety the same way it would as if somebody said, "I'd burn your house down." But after this incident, the harassment stopped. Police were not sure how or if this situation was connected to Chris's disappearance.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good situation, but is it related to what happened?
Well, yeah, there's no way to know. I think you would have to investigate it, though, right? It's a strange incident. There was a threat made. There was some harassment. Blake Potter, Zoe's fiance, told Disappeared he didn't think Chris was forced to leave because Chris would have fought back to protect his family. Chris owned multiple guns and was prepared to defend his property. On June 2nd, 2022, a detective called Alicia and informed her that the mother of Chris's first 2 children wanted to pick the kids up. Alicia was surprised because she hadn't seen the children for well over a year.
Well, that would be surprising then.
That all of a sudden she wants to come get her kids. In March 2020, when the family was still living in Illinois, Chris's ex wanted to see the kids, but she told Chris she had moved in with a new boyfriend. Chris wanted to know more about this man before he let her take the kids, but she refused to tell Chris his last name. Chris would not allow her to have her scheduled visitation until she told him the man's name. She finally did tell him 5 months later. Okay, now we have a new wrinkle.
Sure.
To me, this is strange because if you really want to see your kids, What is preventing you from telling your ex the name of the man you're living with?
Is it because he might have a past with Chris or maybe some type of past with law enforcement?
Yeah, I think those are a couple of possibilities, but obviously there was something there, because if you really want to see your kids, you don't wait 5 months
to give a last name,
to give the name. Chris pointed out that she hadn't seen her kids in months and that it wasn't good for the kids for her to be in and out of their life. Chris told her she would have to take him to court if she wanted visitation, but she never did. And she never tried to see the kids again.
Yeah, but with Chris out of the picture, things going to change now.
Well, and I think that's a speculation or an avenue that you definitely have to look at. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but I mean, that's what we have to do in some of these unsolved cases, right? We don't have a lot to go on. So you really have to dissect what you do have. Could it be that, she didn't want to take Chris to court, but she really did want the kid, and that getting Chris out of the way would make that happen? It's a question that has to be asked. It's
Sure.
something that has to be looked into. Chris's ex-girlfriend called Alicia and informed her that she was coming to pick up the kids the next morning. Alicia pleaded with her not to, telling her she'd be taking them away from the life they knew after they just lost their father. But Chris's ex could not be deterred. When Alicia told the kids they had to leave, they screamed at her not to make them go. But Alicia didn't have a choice. The children cried when she gave them to Chris's ex-girlfriend the next morning. Chris's family was suspicious of his ex-girlfriend because they hadn't told her that Chris was missing. When Alicia asked her how she found out, she wouldn't tell her.
Okay, so that's another level of suspicion.
Yeah, I think it adds a new wrinkle, because why all of a sudden then? If you know nothing about the fact that Chris is missing, do you want to come pick up the kids? And when you call, why are you not asking to speak to Chris? I kind of had that thought as well. Is it because you knew that wasn't a possibility?
Right.
Alicia did some digging on Facebook and learned that the woman was in Missouri the weekend Chris disappeared, staying just an hour away from the family's home.
Okay, I find that a little strange.
Yeah, there are some things that are adding up here that obviously don't make this situation look great.
And I can see where maybe Chris is at the door. He looks out, sees his ex, and turns to their son and says, "Hey, go to your room," and, runs out the door to go confront her. I could see that happening. Like, "Hey, what are you doing here on my property? You're not getting our son." That could happen.
Yeah, I could see that as well. So no doubt Alicia thought that this was a strange coincidence, right? The fact that she was in Missouri, and she was very suspicious of Chris's ex as well. Additionally, the detective Alicia was working with told her that beyond the initial contact, Chris's ex was refusing to answer his phone calls. Okay, does that mean someone's guilty? No. Does it make them look great? No, it doesn't.
No. I mean, at one point she was in a relationship with Chris. They had a child together. Wouldn't you want to try to be cooperative?
Yeah, if a detective called you and said, "Hey, your ex is missing. The father of your child, your children, whatever is missing." This is a person who obviously at one point you loved. Now, maybe that love is gone, but still, there's got to be a special place, right? It may be down really, really deep, but you think you would want to, at the very least, help the police. So when people don't, warranted or not, it makes them look suspicious to a lot of people. It's important to note that no one has ever been named as a person of interest in Chris's case. And that doesn't surprise me, just because I think there's so very little to go on here. Everything we've talked about has been circumstantial.
Sure.
Now, if they had DNA from the cigarette butt, because that really is, like we said, the only physical piece of evidence in this case, it still wouldn't prove anything, but it might lead in a better direction.
Yeah.
But the rest of the stuff is all either a weird coincidence or could mean something. But at the very least, you'd have to say it's all circumstantial. Now, another possibility is that Chris left home to start a new life. Something that comes up in many unsolved cases. The cigarette butt in the truck suggests that someone else was there. So investigators wondered if Chris had a secret relationship. Alicia went through his Facebook and email. She was shocked when she saw that all his emails before May 19th had been deleted. This was Chris's primary email account, and he'd never done anything like this before.
I mean, that again just adds another layer of mystery.
Yeah, it does, because, I think about my daily routine. I have thousands of emails in my personal account. I don't go through and delete them all. Now, I may do cleanup every now and then.
Right.
But if somebody got on my email account and they knew that I'd never really deleted much in the way of emails, but all of my emails from right before I went missing were deleted, that's going to be a big red flag.
Yeah, it definitely would be really strange, especially in your case, because I know when I go into your email, like you said, there's thousands of them in there, and I've never been in your email where you've not had, any emails, like you deleted them.
No, it just would never happen. Once again, please uninstall the spyware that allows you to get into my computer. I've told you this many, many times. It was said that Chris didn't delete anything else on his phone. He didn't delete like text messages or Facebook messages. It was just the emails. And police told the family that they could not retrieve the deleted emails. So again, when you're talking about things that are strange, you got to put that on the list, because I think it makes people wonder, was there an email or maybe a series of emails, an email chain that shed light on someone Chris was having either a problem with or a secret relationship with?
Or your previous partner knew how to get into your email account and knew that there was some emails in there that didn't look good.
Or would possibly be incriminating? Yeah, I get that. Alicia did not believe that Chris would have an affair because all his prior relationships ended with Chris's partner cheating on him. He knew how painful it can be to find out your partner is cheating, so he most likely would not do this to Alicia. Plus, Alicia said she and Chris were still deeply in love with each other and were happy together, despite Chris's recent depression. And I get all of that. I mean, I don't think most people believe that their partner is going to cheat on them. If they find out that they are, most times it comes as a shock, because you're like, I can't believe I never thought you would do that to me.
Right. Never saw that coming. Ashley Madison.
Yeah, I felt bad for you when that hack occurred. It really disclosed a lot of information.
It did for a lot of people.
And you specifically.
No.
The remaining months of 2022 passed with no updates in the case. In early 2023, Alicia's daughter Zoe and her fiance Blake Potter moved to Missouri. In March 2023, Blake went to a job interview in Lebanon, Missouri, about 50 miles from Dixon. On his way home, he was driving in the left lane and saw a man driving a truck in the right lane. Blake looked again and saw that the driver looked just like Chris. He said even his mannerisms were the same. By the time Blake made the connection, he was taking an exit and the man was pulling into a gas station. He did not try to go back and speak to the man. And he later told Disappeared that he regrets this decision because he might have missed a chance to find Chris. He said he stops at the gas station every evening on the way home from work, hoping to see the man in the truck, but he's never seen him again. A few weeks after this sighting, Alicia visited her local feed store. The woman working that day said a customer recently came in and told her he thought he saw Chris in Lebanon, Missouri. This was the second alleged sighting in Lebanon, and both sightings occurred within weeks of each other.
It's a little strange. I mean, maybe he's got a doppelganger, but
Yeah, and that's the thing. You know, you're in a moving vehicle. You look over from the left lane to the right lane. Things are happening pretty quickly. You see someone. How sure are you?
and maybe you're missing that person, and a lot of things might appear to be him.
Well, sometimes you might see what you want to see, if that makes sense.
And I'm thinking if I wanted to disappear, I don't know if I would just go 50 miles up the road.
Yeah, I think we talked about that in another case, but it actually turned out to be true. If you remember that one, the guy left to start a new life, and it was like, I think less than an hour away from where he up and left his family. So, I mean, the one thing that you can't do is completely take it off the table.
No, you can't.
Chris's family wondered if he was still alive and well, but they questioned why he would start a new life somewhere so close to home. I mean, again, things that, we just talked about. Alicia called the detective to ask him to look into the sightings. The detective was noncommittal and said it would be difficult to find someone without identifying information. Alicia was very reluctant to believe Chris left willingly. They had a strong marriage, but even if they were having problems, she knows Chris wouldn't have abandoned his children. He loved being a father. And I do think that's something you have to look at. He would not have just been leaving her. He would have been leaving his children as well. Yeah. Not to say that the guys haven't done it, or women. They have done it.
They have. I think it just would be hard in this case, knowing that they were kind of struggling already. And then you have this individual in the red car driving by, causing some issues. Would you want to leave your family knowing that they're going to struggle more without you being there and not be there to help protect them? Meanwhile, you're going to drive 50 miles up the road and camp out? I don't know.
Well, to be honest with you, it's never, my first choice, usually, not even my second choice when it comes to the possibility.
Yeah.
Even though we've seen that it sometimes turns out to be true. In the spring of 2023, it was reported that over 100 missing people in Missouri were not added to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System database, NamUs. NamUs is funded by the federal government. Law enforcement, medical examiners, and the public are able to access information about missing people. NamUs is a critical resource because it stores important information like DNA, dental records, and fingerprints. Only 13 states require law enforcement to upload cases to NamUs, which means many missing person cases are not in the database. Missouri is one of the states that does not require police to upload cases.
I think that's a shame.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You have this valuable tool. I get it. You can make the argument whether or not it should be required. But even if it's not required, why would you not want to enter all these in there?
Right.
You're missing the opportunity of this really valuable tool doing its job.
Yeah. Take advantage of the resources.
Local news outlet KY3 informed Alicia that Chris was one of the individuals whose information was not uploaded to NamUs. Alicia submitted his information, and now Chris has a page on the NamUs website. By the end of last year, advocates were proposing a new state law that could help fix this problem. Missouri State Representative Tricia Burns told First Alert 4, "I'm just really shocked that we have this free resource to find out that law enforcement across Missouri doesn't know that it exists. This is so traumatic and hits everyone's heart. It's going to be Missourians that will pull the timeline on this right." And I think she's echoing what we just said. Why would you not want to use this thing?
Yeah.
And she's going as far as to say that there's a lot of law enforcement people that don't even know it exists.
Which is, for me, hard to believe.
Well, it also goes to the heart of the problem, though. If it's not a requirement, I ask the question, why wouldn't you want to use it anyway?
Yeah.
If you don't know about it, you don't know to use it. But I agree with you. It's kind of hard to believe that law enforcement personnel don't know about it. Burns pre-filed legislation that would require the police to enter case information into NamUs. A year after Chris went missing, his family spoke about what they think happened to him. Blake Potter does not believe Chris was forced to leave his family. Zoe told Disappeared the only possibility she refuses to believe is suicide. She thinks foul play is a possibility, but acknowledged that Chris might have had a mental breakdown and left because he needed a break. However, she does believe he intended on coming back at some point. So we have Blake, who thought he saw Chris in the car.
Right, in Lebanon.
And I'm sure that goes a long way in forming his opinion about what happened to Chris, because I think he truly believes he saw him.
And if he really felt like that, then of course that's going to be his belief, right? He's alive. He's hanging out in this other town. Nothing bad happened to him.
And then you have Zoe, who says, no way on suicide, possibly foul play, but also possibly, he just left because he had maybe some sort of mental breakdown. Alicia told KY3 in 2023, I don't think he was suicidal. I don't think he killed himself, but I don't know. And that not knowing is what was killing me.
Absolutely.
And we've heard that many, many times. Finding out the end result can often be very traumatic, but we've heard from people time and time again that the years of just not knowing what happened is sometimes the hardest part. In that same article, she was quoted as saying, I feel like he's alive. And then if more people knew he was missing, it would bring him home. Detective Paul Morton also shared his opinion on the case, saying, eventually he should pop up somewhere. At this point, we don't have any reason to believe otherwise, so he should be showing up here soon. Morton noted that Chris lived in several states and has contacts throughout the region. In October 2023, Alicia Hoye organized a fundraiser on GoFundMe to raise money for a private investigator. This page is still active. Part of the page reads, Chris always put others' needs before his own, and he did his absolute best to make sure his family had everything we needed. So we're channeling our grief and agony into finding Chris. Local law enforcement has not done much to find Chris. There are things that could and should have been done early on in the investigation, but weren't. They seem to want to believe Chris left voluntarily, but we know him, and this is not the case. Christopher Hoye is still classified as a missing person. 2 years after he disappeared, Chris has brown hair and hazel eyes. He stands 5'6", 5'7", and he weighed around 175 pounds at the time of his disappearance. He had a thick, dark brown beard and mustache. Chris has scars above his left eyebrow, on his right knee, on both forearms, and on his hands and knuckles. He normally wore wire-frame glasses with thick lenses and a black wedding ring. He was last seen wearing a light t-shirt, dark gym shorts, either blue, gray, or black, white calf-length socks, black sneakers, and a black ball cap. If you have any information about the disappearance of Christopher Hoye, you can call the Pulaski County Sheriff's Department at 573-774-4701. So Gibbs, as we wrap up this case, I do think we kind of have to walk through the potential scenarios.
Sure.
And we've talked about some of them, but really kind of just summarize the case. Number one, the possibility that this was a suicide. And keep in mind, I think all of these are possible. But you look at, I guess, the pros and cons of each, or the plausibility meter of each. He did park on a bridge. He could have jumped into the water.
He could have, and his body could have went much further than what they thought.
Yeah, they dragged for 5 miles. We have no idea how far that current could or would have taken his body. And he was depressed. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Everybody acknowledged he was depressed. At one point, somebody said he was ashamed of kind of where his life was at that point in time. I get that. Those are all valid emotions. But I think to your point that you made earlier, would he have left his family behind in an even worse situation than what they were in? I don't know. I don't know. We're not going to be able to say conclusively much of anything about any of these scenarios because there just isn't enough evidence to really put your finger on anything.
Yeah.
Then I think you have, some type of foul play.
That has to be one of the scenarios.
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking at things that could have happened, why did he run out so quickly? Why did he jump in his truck, drive to where he did? Was it to meet someone? Going back to this strange cigarette butt in the truck. Was somebody sitting in the truck? He was talking to them. They were smoking a cigarette. They put it out in his truck.
Or did something happen before then? And that individual drove his truck to the bridge to make it look like.
That's a great point. Great point. I do think, all of this stuff with his ex is strange. And I'll take it a step further and say it's either some of the weirdest coincidences or there's something more to it. I just don't know. I just thought bizarre. All of that was bizarre. Yeah, I agree with you. Obviously, we can't say that anybody had anything to do with anything. I just really thought all of that was strange. If she really had not been told that he was missing and all of a sudden calls up and says, hey, I'm coming to get the kids.
Yeah.
And if it is a fact that she was in the area when he disappeared, a lot of that stuff, if true, kind of shifts my plausibility meter, as I say.
And to add a twist to that one, maybe he emailed her and said, hey, come get your kids. Something's going to go down here in a week. And then deleted all his emails.
Okay. I like the fact that you're putting spins on some of the scenarios.
Yeah.
And kind of interweaving some of the scenarios. I like that.
Spin master.
And then I think the third and last one is that everything that was going on was too much for him. And he just decided that he couldn't deal with it anymore. And he took off to live a different life. Again, that's never the most plausible scenario to me, but we've seen it happen. It definitely could happen, and it could have happened in this case.
Yeah, he could have said, you know what, they're better off without me. I'm going to go. I don't know what I'm going to do, if anything, but I'm not going to stay here anymore and bring them down. Mm-hmm. Maybe she'll find somebody different, somebody new, and good for them, and I'll go do something.
But how does that happen? He drives his truck to the bridge. He has somebody come get him. And that's why the dog has the scent from his truck, and it disappears in the road because he hops in with somebody else.
Yeah, maybe the plan was always to meet at the bridge at whatever time of day. And I'll take you on to the next town, city, whatever.
And maybe that goes with the emails and the parking of the truck on the bridge to make it look like he had jumped.
Yeah.
Again, you can interweave some of this stuff throughout all of the scenarios.
And if you're going to start a new life, you wouldn't need your wallet. So that's why you would leave it behind.
Mm-hmm. Wallet, phone, you wouldn't want any of that.
No.
So I don't know. It's a real head scratcher. Again, this one is relatively new. He just disappeared a couple of years ago. So
yeah,
hopefully there will be more that comes to light about what happened to Christopher Hoye, but we'll have to wait and see.
And come on, all you states out there that's not using NamUs.
Yeah, definitely. We've got to get on that.
Yeah, get on board.
But that's it for our episode on the disappearance of Christopher Hoye. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Always.
Hey, Mike and Mike. I was just listening to the Henry McCabe episode, and I think that voicemail has got to be one of, hands down, the single most upsetting things that you've ever put on the podcast. I mean, 911 calls are always interesting to listen to and sometimes really heartbreaking. This one was definitely this guy's dying breaths. The guttural noises that you hear that you think are an animal coughing or someone who's possessed is someone who's not controlling their airway. Whether it's because they're being manually strangulated, because there's been some kind of trauma and there's blood occluding the airway, or whether there's been chest trauma and their chest is filling up with blood. But yeah, those are definitely the sounds of someone dying. I've been a physician for 20 years, and that's pretty unmistakable. My husband's been an EMT for longer, and we both agree. He couldn't even listen to the whole voicemail, so I don't know how anybody can think that would be an accidental death, especially because you don't hear any splashing noises to indicate that he was accidentally drowning and the phone wasn't found at the bottom of the lake. I don't know. I don't know. They said that they found the phone at the bottom of the lake, but anyway, really interesting episode, and I'm so glad you guys did not recognize what those noises were. Stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Yeah, so appreciate the voicemail and calling in with your experience. I mean, I understand how that could be that.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, you and I have never heard those sounds.
No.
And so they were just brutal. I mean, I knew that. Whatever was going on was not good.
Right.
But exactly what the sounds were, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jana, and I am in the High City, Denver, Colorado. I've called it 2 times, and I just finished listening to the Unsolved episode on Henry McCabe, and I heard the lady call about the motorcycle, and it made me bring back a memory that I had lost in my brain. My dad always wanted a Harley, and my mom did not. And my dad and I ended up driving from Denver to Sedalia, Missouri. It was a long weekend, so we drove all the way out there, picked up a motorcycle, came home. My mom did not want to ride on the back of the bike, so our across-the-street neighbor did. And, of course, that made my mother jealous. So she got on the back of my dad's bike, and they went for a ride around the block. And she says, I'm never getting on the back of a bike with you again. I want my own. So it just brought up a memory. Both my parents have been gone. My dad died in 2010 and my mom in 2020. So it just brought back a really good memory. And I just wanted to share that with you guys. So I hope you are doing well. I am Team Cat, T-Cat, and I love you both equally. And I hope that you keep your own time ticking and keep your head on swivel. And I will continue to listen. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great day. Bye.
Oh, thank you. So glad you called in, and I don't know, kind of a little heartwarming.
Yeah.
That it brought back that memory that she hadn't thought about in a while.
You had a similar story with you and your wife and your scooters.
Or Vespas?
Yeah.
No, we never had Vespas. I did have a Harley, but I will say there are a lot of people who are afraid to ride on motorcycles,
Sure.
and for good reason.
Yeah.
They obviously can be very dangerous, but when you do ride one, drive one, there's no feeling like it. The exhilaration, I don't know. There's just something about it for sure.
I just know I didn't enjoy riding behind you.
And I got the worst end of the deal. So I don't know what you're talking about. All right. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Stream your favorite drama movies and TV shows on Pluto TV. All for free. Watch all your favorite crime dramas like CSI and Blue Bloods, or your favorite action dramas like Breaking Bad on Stories by AMC or The Walking Dead universe. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of drama movies and TV shows. Download Pluto TV on all your favorite devices for free. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.